presentation on the racing rules of 2021 to 24, and hope everybody enjoys tonight's clinic.
Thank you, Stephanie. I appreciate that. Can you guys see my desktop? Do you see a photo?
I do.
Yeah, I see.
You see the photo with the heavy air and the guys in the Fowleys?
Yeah, looks good,
Oh,
Chris.
perfect. Yeah. Okay. So that was a perfect example of, when things can go wrong. It's going to be in heavy air close quarters. This was would be on race week, 2011, about 25 to 30 knots of wind. And this was the J80 regionals, and it's kind of a cool image. Gary Stunt shot that image, and it was close quarters. We were doing about 6.5 to weather, pretty loaded up, and kind of fun stuff. I've emailed you through Stephanie's assistance a study guide. So if you guys have the ability to take a look at your email and just kind of follow along, all the information I've published to you in a reference that you can go back and take a look at. So hopefully you have a chance to take a look at that and open it up on either a different computer, or while you're hiding out on this Zoom meeting, you can look at it in your email. It's a PDF. So hopefully you can see that. Let's go back to this. Yeah, so I've welcomed, I almost had Dave Dillenbaugh involved in this, which would have really been fun. He's a character. But we were able to get international judge Jared Hickman to join us tonight. So he'll be logging in shortly, I think. And his credentials are at the top of that document that I sent you. Pretty cool. And he seems like a pretty level head. When he doesn't like something or thinks something looks wrong, he's really good at explaining it. So he's actually become my judge in training guide, if you will, or my mentor. And it's pretty cool how he operates a protest room and everything else. It's very, very low key, and it always turns into a learning lesson, which is nice. In the so let's take a look here. I wonder if I can. Just bear with me as I take a look at this guy here. So yeah, you can see my document now. Opening statements. Can you all see that okay?
Nope,
Yep.
just your picture.
Perfect.
I just see the.
I'm sorted.
I just see the photo.
Say again.
I only have the photo.
I've got the photo.
Okay. Can you guys take a look at your email?
Chris, can you just take that PDF and put it on your desktop? Just instead of the photo, put the PDF there.
Yeah, I thought I just did that.
When you're sharing out, Chris, just share out your whole desktop versus sharing out just a specific thing. It should be the
Okay.
top left of what you're sharing out.
So let me see if I can do that. That'd be good. Top left. So where do I do that, Ken?
Just when you go to click share. So I'll stop your sharing for now. So go ahead and click share screen, and it should be your top left thing that shows up when you click share screen.
I'm on my iPad. Does that make a difference?
Oh, it could. I'm not. I don't have the iPad one up. Sorry.
Chris, did you open it with a browser? Did you open this with a browser? The
I
link?
did.
Then it doesn't make any difference. It's not computer dependent.
If you're using an iPad, you have to open the thing and have it on your iPad and then share it. So it has to be on your iPad screen, open and ready to use.
Okay, I appreciate that. See if I can make that work. That would be great.
It's kind of one more step if you're on an iPad.
Mhm. I'll give this about 5 more seconds. Okay, let's do
Hey,
this.
while we're waiting, have you guys checked out the latest 48 North that just came out today? You see that we have our local boat on the cover of 48 North. That's
Really?
Dash. If you can't tell, there's Dash. I don't know.
Nice.
So there's also a nice 2-page article in there about Dash and their double-handed adventures and plans and hopes and dreams. So check it out. It's a great article.
Nice.
So are you guys looking at the racing
Justin.
rules? Can you see the racing rules of sailing here on this?
I see
No.
crazy arrow.
You want me to share your PDF out, Chris?
Yeah, would you please?
It might work if someone else who's on the call with a, yeah, there you go.
All right. Oh,
There you
this is great. Okay, thanks, Ken.
So Ken, you just need to make it a little bit bigger.
Yeah, I did that for myself. I should zoom. Yeah. Okay,
Thanks.
super.
The screen,
Okay.
hey, Ken,
So,
the screen size of that is only about half of the resolution of the screen. Can you make it taller? The containing object?
Well, I could do this.
No, the container, not the document, but the container is only half the height of the screen.
Not sure what to do. I've got an ultra wide screen. Let me try one more thing for you.
There you go.
better.
Perfect.
that
like
looks
that better?
really good to me.
Yep, that's good.
Getting better. Yep.
Okay, and then let's see if I'm gonna be able to scroll. I'll touch that with my,
Nope, you need to tell me when you want me to scroll.
that's what I thought. Okay, simple enough. All right, well, I'm gonna move on. So Jared Hickman should join us here in a little bit, and here's his credentials. So Jared's here. All right, thanks, Jared. Nice credentials, by the way. Let's scroll down. I just wanted to make a quick comment about the program that Boris and Stephanie have set up this year. It's awesome. You know, the information that's come out of each of our members that has such unique expertise has really been a wonderful thing. It's impressive to me just how much depth there is in this club in various areas, and these Zoom meetings appear to be revealing that. So hopefully I can meet the grade. Okay, let's go ahead and scroll down, Ken. Yeah, so here's kind of my target. So we're going to talk a little bit about U.S. sailing membership, rules, products, how to kind of how the book is organized. I know a lot of you have looked at the book, some of you have studied it, but just kind of a quick overview won't hurt. And some of the other tools that are available. We'll take a look at U.S. prescription rule changes and some of the big changes in up to Rule 60. After that, it becomes kind of academic. There's a couple of tangibles and some observations that I'd like to share at the end. Go ahead, next page, please. Yes. So U.S. sailing, it's kind of your union. It's the pathway for judges to become international judges like Jared, maybe someday myself, who knows. But they're the folks that set up these national events and really raise the bar on the quality of racing and help guide the outcome of the rules. So anybody that's not a U.S. sailing member, I urge you to do this because it benefits all of us in sailing. Next. Okay, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this off or not. Try. I had let me just see, sharing my screen. I've spent quite a bit of time dealing with the application. It's pretty cool. What's the nicest of all is all the documents are available right at your hand. You can type in injury and search all the rules and see where it pops up. You can type in prescriptions and see all the prescriptions kind of in a scroll at once. It's a very powerful tool. I really, I have multiple copies of the hard copy of the book here and the Dave Dellenbaugh, and I'm not sure I'm going to be using this like I have in the past. I think I'm going to be using the electronic version. And what's really cool is that if you have a cell signal, you can use it. It doesn't require Wi-Fi, so it's pretty slick. The protest form, this red little pencil here, you tap that and up comes the fillable protest form, and then it takes you to the whiteboard. where you have a chance to put together events 1, 2, 3 as things can't come together. And frankly, it's a lot easier than handwriting a protest, because as soon as you put it down on paper, you go, oh, that's not what happened. So in this app, you can adjust it and fine tune the sort of how things came together much easier. And then when you submit it, it's way more accurate than what anybody would have normally done on paper. So, and then because of COVID and other things, we're going to be submitting these things electronically, which means these protests are going to be heard a lot sooner. And notification that there's a hearing is going to happen a lot faster. So just expediting these things is going to be way more efficient. So I recommend that everybody download this app on your iPhone or your Android, excuse me, and practice it. So if you go out like Sunday and there's a couple of interactions after racing, find a time to sit down over the phone or otherwise and load the app and try putting together a scenario as to what you thought happened. Get used to using it. Ultimately, you might be at an event where you don't want learning the application for the first time to impede your ability to submit a good protest. So I really recommend using it frequently. And don't forget, all the rules, all the documents, and the Dave Perry videos are in there as well. So it's pretty cool. So I tried to download the app onto a Windows machine. That didn't work too good. Okay, let's go to the next picture. So this is what it looks like when you load it. And the key is that search bar at the top right here, next to the US Sailing logo. When you tap that, that's when you enter the rule system. And it works really well. And then there's another search bar at the top, and then you can type in whatever you want and you'll start to target it. Works quite nicely. Next picture. So when you're inside the app, you'll see this logo at the bottom. And this is where you get the media library. And next to questions or rules or prescription changes are Dave Perry logo or icons. You tap that and you either get an explanation or you get a video. It's very slick. Next. And of course, you can buy your waterproof book. Next. And you can buy your Dave Perry, Understanding the Racing Rules of Sailing. Next. This is all on the US Sailing website. And of course, the 100 best quizzes, which is kind of a fun thing to do when you're dragging a boat to an event. Ken and I used to do that. It's pretty fun. Next. Okay. So this is in your PDF. There's a link behind the study version. So the study version shows all the contributions that were made that drove the change to the rule. And so Dick Rose and his comrades built this product, and it's an in-depth document. But it submits the problems with the rules, why they recommended the rule changes, and how the rule evolved into today. It's a really big document. It's kind of what rules geeks do. But if you run into a rule you just don't understand, you want to know why they changed it, that's a pretty good place to look. Next up is down here, rules, documents from World Sailing. World Sailing, and if I'm incorrect, jump in and correct me. World Sailing is the ultimate author of the rules. And in this link, you will see the list of documents that go with it, such as trying to interpret Rule 42. So now that I'm a member of the Aero group in Seattle, there's been lots of chatter about, how I made the boat go faster upwind, and I was pumping on every wave, and the conversation got pretty aggressive. Eventually, Jared had to step in and say, "No, I'm not sure I like where this conversation is going. Sounds like this Rule 42 is getting bent a little bit." But this interpretation really helps to understand when an umpire is going to call it and when they're likely not to call it. So that's one document that's a super good example of the resources that are available within this app and on the World Sailing website. Next page. Case books, call books, appeal books, rule geeks like that stuff. Judges like that stuff. It's all on there. Not exactly what I'd call light reading, but it's out there. Next page. I enrolled in all of the Dave Dellenbaugh seminars or webinars that he's been putting on Mondays, like Rule the Run, how to master the rounding a mark and windward legs and starts. Really good webinars. This is an excellent resource that not only gets into how to sail fast, but he also leans into the rules and how to apply the rules in sticky situations so that things turn out good for both boats, mostly yourself. He's a past tactician of the America's Cup program, and his his videos and his aerials with his drones and things of this nature, they're amazing. So there's no 1 hour webinar that can do justice for the work that he has done and put together in his publications. Once you've signed up for it, if you can't see the webinar that night, you are given a password to go back and look at it as many times as you want. So it's one of the best buys for understanding rules and gaining access to developing your tactics. So I recommend it highly. Next. Okay, rule book. So how many of you have your rule book, your new rule book? Just say aye.
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 Okay. I still think it's worth having a hard copy just to have one on the boat just in case. But just kind of a quick review. For those who have your rule book, and I really want to try to share my screen one more time. Can we try that? So I've got the app up. How do I share what's on my desktop? Let's try it one more time.
You just have to click share on your side.
Okay, let's try it one more time. Share content, screen. Okay. Let's see if this works. Does that work?
Right now, I'm just seeing the black crazy arrow.
All right. So I've got the racing rules of sailing up. Let me try that one more time. Share content. I'd really like this to work. So if I share a screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, start broadcast.
There
You
you
are sharing
go.
your screen. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So now you can see the racing rules of sailing, right?
Yep.
Yep.
Oh, awesome. Thanks. That's great. So I'm going to go to the top and I'm going to just touch the search button up here. And so what you first see are the rules, the rule book. And so I like to kind of start at the beginning of the book, and let's see if I can get this to work. It's on a tab system. Okay, don't care about that. This is kind of an interesting little letter. It's worth reading. I won't belabor the point too much. This is more important. This is kind of a quick overview of the changes and sort of some of the benefits of how the rule book is written, what's in bold italics and question. No. So this forward is worth your attention. I recommend everybody read that. Other rule documents. This is where the really cool stuff is. So the Rule 42 interpretation, your notice of race guide, your sailing instruction guide, all the documents that anybody would ever use in case books. It's right here at fingertip electronically, which really is great compared to all the books I used to pack around to judges' meetings. Introduction. So introduction talks a little bit about bear with me for a second. Definitions, yeah, documents for terminology. So this is these terms are all throughout the rule book. And what I've learned at trying to study to be a judge is that every part of this book plays a pretty important role. And you really can't ignore any one section. So getting familiar with what's in each of these documents is really a big deal. And I don't know. I think that the experts have worked on this as hard as they can to get this thing as organized as possible. But I still feel like there's bits and parts, sort of scattered about the book. Just the more you look at it, the more you become familiar with it, the faster you can find these things, and away you go. And definitions are next. And this is a really cool tool. So when in the hard copy, you'd be looking at this thing, definitions, and you just read it as it is. Well, here you have the Dave Perry interpretations, and so you can tap on the Perry, and he gets into the details and helps to explain what this really means and what the limits are. So in this particular case, I'll be getting down to that person in a minute. So I'm gonna rules. Okay. Pardon?
So Chris, is that basically the full Understanding the Racing Rules book that he's got that's now been integrated into the app?
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
Yes, and there's some other cool things that get better, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But for things like proper course is a really good example. Sometimes if a symmetrical boat is sailing along an asymmetrical boat, downwind, leeward mark, there comes a pretty good argument about what a proper course is. And, I might have gotten involved in a protest in Anacortes, might have been Blackfoot versus J80 or Rumpus versus J80. I'm symmetrical or asymmetrical, they're symmetrical. We're trying to figure out who's on proper course. And I got to tell you that the protest committee really had a hard time trying to sort that out. But if they had had a tool like this where they could have gone right into the definitions and looked at an opinion like this one from Dave Perry, it really would have helped speed up what was a confusing event. So in my opinion, this is one of the coolest, tools ever. And Dave Perry, and I've used some of his information in my program tonight, has really made it his mission to take whatever materials he collects and provides and make them available through U.S. sailing membership. So if there was no other benefit than that, that is like huge. And so I can't say enough about signing up for U.S. sailing. So that's definitions. That's awesome. We get into prescriptions. So for those that are new, and I was kind of hoping that there was some youth in this meeting tonight, it took me a while to kind of figure out what prescriptions are. However, prescriptions are in bold italics throughout the rule book. It usually starts out with something that says U.S. sailing or U.S. prescriptions prescribed for U.S. world sailing rules prescriptions. And it's pretty well nailed down as to, so U.S. prescription starts with U.S. sailing prescribed. So that's a prescription. They are throughout the rule book. So you can get a list of prescriptions, but you have to understand that they're embedded in the rule book as well. And so the key to U.S. sailing prescriptions is that it's what's different about the world sailing rules that applies in the U.S. or while navigating through U.S. waters to an event. So it's what is modified by the U.S. from the world sailing rules. So world sailing rules, everybody has a copy. Most countries will have their own prescriptions. We have our own. And one of those starts out with Rule 25. And let's see if I can get into that. Rules and objectives of basic principles. So I'm just going to read from my text here and coast on my screenshot here a little bit. Actually, Ken, if you can, let me see if I have this now. So I think I do. Yes, I do. So you can see my screen now, right?
Yes, we can.
Nice. Thank you. Just scroll on down. Yeah. So right here, all the prescriptions that have been modified are on this link.
Okay.
Okay. So that PDF has a live link that takes you right to this document. And so this is a really nice way of knowing, what was updated. And you won't miss a thing. If you want to read it all, it's all right here. So part of my goal in providing you this webinar is to provide you resources that give you all the details in, A through Z, so that you can benefit from as much information as I've been able to acquire while doing this research. So one of the kind of big changes in US prescriptions has to do with in Rule 25.1 actually, if you have your rule book open. It just says that the race committee is going to make sure that the NOR, the sailing instructions, are readily available to everybody throughout the entire event. So I think that this is primarily aimed at making sure that people are really well informed before they sign up. And you're going to find that the NORs have a lot more leverage than they used to have. And they actually become part of what we would refer to as the rules. And I'll let me just see if I have that right here. Yeah, so I just want to hit on this while I'm right on that topic. The rules are not just the rules. That's a big deal. So right up here, let me get down here, right here. And Jared, if this is not true, you stop me, but I'm pretty sure I'm in the ballpark. When I was in judges training, it took me a while to sort of wrap my brain around this, mostly because I'm slow. So the rules, we think of rules, part 1 through 7. Well, the rules aren't just part 1 through 7. So terminology, definitions, prescriptions, introduction has some information in there. Race signals, preambles, appendices, not the titles, class rules, the NORs and SIs, and any other document that governs the event are the rules. So it took me a while to figure that out. I think it was my last judges class where I realized it's like this whole darn thing from A through Z's rules. And so you can't gloss over a preamble, like the preamble in part 2, for instance. It's so important. And when we're taking judges tests, it's crazy where they find some of these questions about preambles and class rules, sometimes in the NORs. It's all over the book. So you have to realize that virtually everything in the book is a rule. And by understanding that, then you won't gloss over certain areas and concentrate on others more than you should.
Hey, Greg,
It's a pretty big deal.
Interject just real quick, because you are missing something on your list.
Is that Jared?
Yeah, the World
Can you
Sailing
speak up,
Regulations.
Jared?
Can you hear me? Hello?
You're a little bit muffled.
I was just going to say you're missing the World Sailing Regulations.
Ah,
Which is one of the new rules. Rule 6.
the World Sailing Regulations.
Yep.
Thank you. I'll add that. Didn't know that. Okay, super. And then I'll republish this document. Yeah, okay. So anyway, back down to these changes. So this is the one that talks about the NOR and the SI is going to be available through competitors throughout the entire event. This one, Rule 32, prescribes that sailing instructions, if the SI is so state, the race committee may display flag A, and that's flag A with no sound, which essentially says no more races for the day. And that takes care of whether or not the races were started, the races were abandoned, all those exceptions. This just says we're done. So it's kind of a smart rule. I like it. And it makes SIs a little bit more functional. This one here, a finishing mark. Yeah, so this one's pretty much self-explanatory. It basically says if the race committee is absent when a boat finishes, she should, at the first reasonable opportunity, report the race committee finishing time in relation to nearby boats. It all comes down to a 90-degree angle to the remaining mark from the last leg. So it's pretty straightforward. It makes good sense. This one, not going to spend too much time on this one, but 61, Rule 61. So at the end of the rule, they made this change. Fees for protest, requests for redress should be set and described. No fee shall be charged for protest or request for redress. Well, Cow Bay, I couldn't file a protest because the SI said they won't accept the protest unless they get a bottle of rum with the protest form. So this was the big international protest that went off between Crazy Ivan and Jeremy Smith, went on for a year, ultimately heard by Olympic Protest Committee. But the whole thing was predicated on them being paid a bottle of rum or they wouldn't accept my protest form. So I was glad to see that this has been fixed. And I'm sure the Canadians have noticed.
Like I said, Chris, but that's been in the U.S. sailing rule book as long as I've been a judge. That's Cowboys in Canada.
Yes. Somebody else? No. Okay, moving on. Ta-da. Okay, so hails. If you folks take a look at your SARC calendar that came out recently, in the back of that, on page 13, Charlie McCauley sort of wrote his summary of what he thinks the big changes are in the racing rules. And this one came up, but it's pretty straightforward. English is ultimately the common language if it's reasonably understood by everybody else. So not too fancy. This is one of the biggies. I'd like to have Jared, after I'm done chatting about this, talk about this a little bit. So now finishing over earlies, starting penalties, and is it also overlap, Jared, where it's the hull, not the prodder, not the kite? So did the overlap definition of overlap also refer to hull? Do you know? Anybody?
I know this rule applies to start and finish. I think that's a good question on overlap for in the zone. I don't know.
Jerry?
I think it doesn't apply to spread when you're out sailing on the course.
It does or it does not?
For overlap.
For overlap, your sprit is still part of the overlap.
Yeah, definitions, clear astern, clear ahead. One boat is clear astern of another when her hull and equipment in normal position are behind a line, a beam from the aftmost part, blah, blah, blah.
There you go. Okay, so overlap, it doesn't apply to overlap, but it does apply to start finishes. So that's a big deal. So if it's a downwind start, like around the county, our PRO, so here comes Time Bandit or Raku, and they've got their prodders out, kites are up, it's downwind start. They don't start until their hull, the bow, crosses the line, not the prodder and the kite.
Chris, I'm not reading it that way. This says finish, correct? What is it? Not talking about the start.
Yeah, so I'm kind of guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So that the reason I highlighted the word hull is because what changed the definition of finish is the hull and nothing else. It
And
turns
that's
out
the
that
finish.
that's the same thing that applies to the start.
Where does it say that it applies to the start?
Under the definition start, they changed both the definition finish and the definition start to be the hull.
Interesting.
Yes.
So at the start, if your spinnaker is over at the horn, but your hull is not, you're still good then.
Yes.
That is correct.
That's kind of weird. Well,
Yeah.
that would have fixed the problem for us in earlier in the year, Ken.
Yeah. So on page 6 of your hard copy, in definitions, under start, it refers to that. So that's probably the biggest change in the rules right there. Let me see if I have this, and let me go to this. And if I go to definitions and I go right down here, Bob, this is the beauty of this whole thing. Sail the course to start. Okay, so here it is. And then here's Perry's talk about it. So her hull, having been entirely on the pre-start side of the starting line, then you're in. Okay, so it's there. Okay, so moving on. Mark Rune. So this one
Can I
is
stop you for a second, Chris?
you bet.
I just want to expand on that. That because it's the biggest change, it's also the one with the biggest amount of discussion. And World Sailing has already done a Q&A on it. So if you go to the World Sailing website, there's a Q&A that clearly defines what a hull is and what a hull isn't. So if you're all curious about it, let's look at that Q&A.
Yeah, okay, that's good to know. Appreciate that. Mark Room. Okay, so I'm just scooting along here. Some new phrases. Around the past. The phrase sail the course is now italics. What do you think the impact of this is, Jared? Is this housekeeping, or is there a little bit more to this than that?
Yeah, so except for the start finish change, most of the rules are just to clarify. So it's not going to change the game any, it's just going to make it easier to know what the game is. So in the past, it's always been the proper course is the course, the person would sail to finish. And they just changed it a little bit to make it clear what the proper course is, because there was a lot of confusion over it.
Okay, I'm going to scoot down to this one right here. This is a common issue. So oftentimes the downwind involves sailing around the start finish line. So in the definition of obstruction, they allow the race committee to designate either an object or a line, that's new terminology, as a start, such as a start finish line as an obstruction. Well, obstructions are different than marks of the course in terms of whether or not you can touch them. And does it change the rules of room at an obstruction versus mark at room at a mark? They're not that much different, are they, Jared? Room at an obstruction versus room at a mark?
For practicality, they're about the same. Yeah, for this argument, I'd say they're pretty much the same.
Yeah, you can touch an obstruction, you cannot touch a mark. So I think that's the biggest difference. Okay, I'll scoot along. This is a good one. So I was in Hawaii with Jake doing high school racing. One of the coaches witnessed somebody else's sailor getting sucked out of the causeway. Didn't say anything. And so I noticed it and I said, well, geez, we got to get on the radio and reach out to the folks on the water, take care of this. Well, as sad as it is, the coach kind of drug his heels because there was it was a team race and this person, well, didn't stay with the team. So now support people like coaches, parents, they are now subject to very similar rules as those that are on the water. And I think it's great. The support person issue not only applies to misconduct, but it applies to the environmental rules. So they're held to the same standards as those who are racing, which I think is great. So this is good. Support persons is a big upgrade. Designated road sailing published. So this is, there it is. That's the one. Thank you, Jared. Sailing the course. This new definition, sailing course, is simply the language of previous rule 28.2, formerly titled sailing the course. So housekeeping. And here's the one for the start, Bob. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, so this one is a pretty big fish. The exoneration rule and how it's been reorganized in the race book. Let me see if I have a cool little video for you on that. Let's go like this, and let's do this and hit this guy. Yeah, so check this out. This is kind of cool. And this is part of the app.
Hi, I'm Dave Perry. In this segment, I'm going to explain
Can you guys
how
hear this okay?
exoneration works in the 2021 to 2024 rules.
Yep.
And specifically what the changes to Rule 43 and the basic principles of sportsmanship and the rules are. When a boat is exonerated, that means she's not penalized for breaking a rule. And she can't be penalized for breaking a rule if she's exonerated. Now, under the previous rules, it was the protest committee that exonerated a boat if it decided that she was entitled to it. And there were 3 different rules in the book that describe conditions that entitled a boat to be exonerated. Rule 14B involved contact that didn't result in damage or injury. Rule 21 involves sailing within the room or mark room a boat was entitled to. And Rule 64.1a involved a situation where a boat was compelled to break a rule by another boat that was breaking a rule. In the 2021 to 24 rules, the conditions for exoneration haven't changed. So they're still the same with a slight tweak to the Rule 14 exoneration. But the change in the new rules is that now the rules themselves state that a boat is exonerated at the time of the incident. In other words, if a boat is compelled to break a rule by another boat that's breaking a rule, that boat is automatically exonerated on the spot. This concept allowed them to fix a loophole in the rules. It was in the basic principle of sportsmanship and the rules, which previously said a fundamental principle of sportsmanship is that when competitors break a rule, they will promptly take a penalty, which may be to retire. And Rule 2, fair sailing, has always said a boat shall compete in compliance with recognized principles of sportsmanship and fair play.
I messed that up. Sorry, guys. Could you hear him okay? I was having a hard time hearing him.
Them to fix a loophole
Yep.
in the rules.
It's coming through just
It
fine.
was in the
Okay,
basic
good,
principle of
thanks.
sportsmanship and the rules, which previously said a fundamental principle of sportsmanship is that when competitors break a rule, they will promptly take a penalty, which may be to retire. And Rule 2, fair sailing, has always said a boat shall compete in compliance with recognized principles of sportsmanship and fair play. But that's not what was happening on the race course. Because, for example, if a boat knew she was compelled to break a rule by another boat that was breaking a rule, or if a boat was taking mark room and was forced to break a rule by a boat that wasn't giving them enough room, the boat expected that if they were protested, the committee would exonerate them. So they never took a penalty, even though they'd broken a rule. But technically, as a result, they were breaking Rule 2, fair sailing, by not competing in compliance with the recognized principles of sportsmanship as stated in the basic principle of sportsmanship and the rules. So that problem has been fixed because now boats are automatically exonerated at the time of the incident by the exoneration rules. So now the basic principle of sportsmanship and the rules says a fundamental principle of sportsmanship is that when a boat breaks a rule and is not exonerated, she'll promptly take an appropriate penalty or action, which may be to retire. To further clarify this new concept, the rule writers took the 3 rules and put them all together into one rule. It's Rule 43, exoneration. It's the rule right before Rule 44, which is taking a penalty. Their thinking is there's an incident, and you think to yourself, am I exonerated or am I not? In which case I need to take a penalty. So that's the logic between 43 and 44. Rule 43, which is called exoneration, 43.1a says, when as a consequence
Okay,
of
I'm
breaking a
gonna
rule,
bail on
the
that.
boat has
think.
compelled another boat to break a rule.
Yeah, very good. Go back to this and hit that, and away we go. You hear me okay, everybody?
Yep.
Okay. So anyway, one of the cool things about the app is that there's videos in there to explain these changes and other things. So it's a really nice tool. I think the biggest issue here with regards to 43 is that if somebody forces you into a mark and there's no doubt about overlap, the person that hits that mark wouldn't have to do a spin to exonerate themselves or be exonerated later. They literally don't have to do the spin in the first place. So, but you've got to have a pretty good case to survive that. Scooting along, so I'm going to move on to supporting those in danger. So it's now that parents, coaches, and other support people are required to give all possible help to anybody in a vessel in danger. So that is a little broader paintbrush than what we had before, and they can be penalized if they don't do it. So I think that's good, and that sort of speaks to what I saw in Hawaii. This is self-explanatory. I'm going to scoot on. This is in your document. Rule 3. Yeah, so rules 4 and 3 have been reversed, and acceptance or decision to race Rule 3 is becoming important now in our issue of prescription. I think it's 81 now. It's becoming important. Preambles. So this is a big deal. So I want you guys to read as many of the preambles as you can and be familiar with them. But the big deal here is that the NOR, and those who are writing NORs right now know this already, the NOR has a lot more leverage in it than it had before. And it actually, the NOR and the SI is I'll just back up a click. The NOR has a lot more information in it than it did before, and it has the ability to change the nature of a race. So I want everybody to be aware, any regatta that you become a part of, be aware that that NOR has at least the leverage of the SIs now. It's a pretty big deal. Avoiding contact. So if there's contact, there's kind of this threshold where, boats are supposed to avoid each other, when it becomes imminent that there's going to be a collision. Both boats are responsible for avoiding a collision. Where things really change or escalate is when there's damage or injury. And damage isn't a scratch, and, injury is more than a pulled muscle. Jared, what would you say the minimum definition of injury would be?
Well, that's a loaded question. Yeah, it's more than a scratch, but basically how I've always put it is if it's prevented that crew member from functioning at full function. A bump on the head is the big deal, but if that crew member is taken away from their job, then it's injury. But it becomes to a dictionary definition of injury since it's not defined in the rule book.
Gotcha. So major damage, there's been a lot of discussions about major damage as well. And Ron, you've seen, at pretty high levels, boats that get holed on port starboards, bows that are in cockpits. That's pretty clear what that is. If the boat can't continue to sail, that's pretty obvious. But, when it's a a scratch down the side of the boat, goes the length of the boat, but doesn't change the performance of the boat, would you refer to that as major damage?
Completely depends on the boat. So if it's a 1970s J24 that's been sailed hard and put away wet for 50 years, probably not. But if it's a brand spanking new J170 out of the yard, yeah, that'll probably be considered major damage.
It's good to know. What do you think, Ron? Have you thought about that?
Yeah, my opinion is over, and this is, I think, common globally around, in the Grand Prix levels of the sport. If it's something that, even if it's a big deep scratch, if it's something that's going to cost more than about $100 to fix, right? And in most cases, that's any fiberglass job, any chip, anything, including a big long scratch down the side. Anything that's going to cost about $100 to fix, then that's significant damage. And that kind of goes along with the whole theme of we should keep that to a bare minimum, especially in this day and age where we're borrowing boats to sail. Insurance is always a big question and a big challenge in our sport. So I think it comes down to respect of the equipment and respect of your fellow competitors. At the end of the day, when boats touch, there's really no good reason for boats to touch. We're all at a very basic level, good enough sailors to keep boats from touching. And if boats touch in a way that inadvertently causes damage, then that's a much greater issue. And we should always do everything we can to avoid that. So I hope that helps.
Appreciate that input.
Well, if you don't mind me expanding on that a little bit, the rules are written so that the boats never touch. If two boats touch, somebody has broken a rule. Where the significant damage comes into play is allows the protest committee to protest a boat, even if nobody filed a protest. It gives us look, there's this damage on this boat. We need to step in and deal with this because obviously a significant rule breach was had. That's where the significant damage comes into play.
Yep, I think I understand that. Let me see if I can get one more video up from Perry. This one's a pretty good deal, a pretty good one. It's on 16.2. Has to do with the anti-hunting rule and how they've kind of emphasized this for windward, sailing to windward now versus the downwind and why they did that. Let me see if I have that. 16.2, here it is. Let's see if we can get it. If the audio is not okay, something let me know.
Well, hi, I'm Dave Perry, and in this segment, I'm going to explain the changes in Rule 16.2, changing course. This is the most significant game change in Part 2 of the rules. As a reminder, Rule 16.1 is the rule that tells right-of-way boats that when they change course, they have to give keep clear boats room to keep clear. Rule 16.2 takes it one step further. In addition to 16.1, 16.2 applies in a situation where a port and a starboard tack boat are converging on a collision course, and the port tack boat is choosing to bear away and pass to leeward of the starboard tack boat. In effect, she's conceding the cross and going behind starboard. Well, Rule 16.2, which is often called the anti-hunting rule for the starboard tack boat, from bearing off and causing the port tacker to have to immediately bear off further in order to keep clear. This concept remains the same in the new rules, nothing's there. But the rule's been narrowed and it's been clarified to prevent unintended consequence that came up in team racing. First, you're going to see in the previous rule, the 2017 rule on the left, all the things in the rule that have been changed are underlined. And you're going to notice that the rule 16.2 went into effect after the starting signal. You're noticing in the new rule on the right, all the changes are in red, the new rule effect when the boats are on a beat to windward. We go to case 132 to find out what world sailing means by on a beat to windward. But as you might expect, you're on a beat to windward when you're racing upwind towards the windward mark, when your proper course is to sail close hauled. That's on a beat to windward is. And of course, we don't have a proper course before the starting signal. We learned that from the definition of proper course. So therefore, Rule 16.2 goes into effect after the starting signal, meaning that just as in the past starting signal, there's full hunting. But the big change now is that 16.2 only applies when boats are on a beat to windward. So no longer does it apply downwind. It's a minor game change, but now if you're on starboard on a run and a port tacker is heating up to go behind you, now you can head up a little bit and make them head up a little farther than they wanted. Maybe they have to go a little higher than they wanted, and their passing astern isn't as clean. That's now legal under the new rules. Now here's another, here's an explanation of what the problem was in the previous rule. In the previous rules, the rule said that the rule applied when port was keeping clear by passing astern of a starboard tack boat. And in team racing, there was a call D2, which said, once a starboard tacker is sailing below 90 degrees, now port isn't sailing to pass astern of her, she's sailing to pass in front of her. So 16.2 doesn't apply. So once starboard below 90 without immediately making port do anything, now she can go all the way down and make them jibe. It's like, no, that's not it. And as the team racers remember, there were many test rules along the last few years to try and clean this up. And the final version is, so no more test rules for team racing. So the new rule, it says that when port is keeping clear by sailing to pass to leeward of the starboard tack boat, downwind of the starboard tack boat. Doesn't matter how starboard is aiming. So it's going to clean away that loophole. Now, subtle changes, in the old rule it said, once port was sailing to pass astern, starboard couldn't change if that were to make port immediately have to do something. So that was down or up. Look at the new rules. The rule says starboard shall not bear away if that's going to make port have to immediately change course. So now the situation is going upwind, you're on port starts to bear away below close hauled. So now she's considered to be sailing to pass to leeward to starboard, even though she's not aiming there yet. That's how she's considered. And now starboard can't bear away at all if it would make port have to immediately change course to continue to keep clear. So no more hunting down once port is bearing away and the boats are within, a length or so. But notice if starboard heads up and brings her stern towards port, port might have to bear away further to continue keeping clear. That's no longer a foul, whereas it was a foul in the previous rule. So now if starboard wants to, go into a slam dunk and starts to head up and port has to bear away further, there's no problem there as long as port can keep clear.
Okay. Good one. Okay, so that's a pretty big deal. In the J70 practices about a month ago, I actually applied the slam dunk and not realizing that going to weather was actually okay. But anyway, it's nice to see them clarify that. I'm going to kind of accelerate things here a little bit. Bear with me. It's nice to know that you can get clarification on rules and maneuvers like that through the app. And so I just wanted to demonstrate those two videos so that if there's a question and it's not really clear between two boats on the dock, just launch the app and off you go. Okay, so there's a new flag. So the new flag is the Victor flag. And this is the one that is kind of a search and rescue instruction and to monitor a communication channel. So this is now in the back of the book, and it'll be on the new placards that are coming out, which are not readily available through US Sailing yet, but they will be soon. So that one's important to realize it's new. So Jared or Ron, either one of you want to speak to the changes in PFDs Either one of you up to date on that?
Just put a different flag up.
Yeah, and I think that there's a little bit more flexible, or a little bit more definition that refers, kind of gets back to the one design or the class rules on PFD stuff. But that is the flag for PFDs now. You're right. Scooting along.
Yeah, Chris, let me one quick comment on that.
Yes.
The phrasing there used to be a little stronger when a committee would put the Y flag up. You used to have to, I believe you used to have to put a Coast Guard certified, that countries that you're racing in, Coast Guard certified PFD that was legal in that country. So what they're saying is that this is a PFD you have to put on. Not, well, it looks like you're about to cover this one next, not necessarily the one you're required to carry on board. So I just wanted to, I think that's what I was trying to clarify. It looks like you're headed there next.
Yeah, so comment is right on the money, Ron. And this paragraph refers to that. And I think that I'll let it be that you guys can read this when you're looking for something boring to read. But it does get into the details of what you're supposed to carry and what you're and what the rules are for that particular country. And it's all right there. Okay, outside help. This is an interesting one. So basically, it's saying that it's trying to prevent anybody from feeling like they might get penalized if they gain from helping somebody. Is that how you guys see this one?
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. There's been a problem in the past where boats won't stop and help because they're worried about, affecting their race. And there's also been this, I don't want help because it's going to affect my race, right? So this basically just makes it so I can get help and I can keep racing.
Right, and then they won't be penalized. I was involved in trying to avoid a ferry boat. It was perceived that I got an advantage in the process of doing it. I documented when I started, what directions I went, for how long I went, when I restarted. I documented everything very carefully. But I think the takeaway message is simply this: when that event was over, that wasn't an outside help call. That was just to get out of the way for commercial traffic. The amount of questioning that I went through after that event would have caused me not to do it as soon as I did it. So very similar, and this has come up in around the county where we're out in Boundary Pass, and boats pretty late in terms of getting out of the way of commercial traffic coming out of Vancouver. And in hindsight, I started to realize that they don't want to be criticized for making a maneuver to clear a freighter that might be perceived by their peers as benefiting them in the race. And I wrote an article about that. It's a short article. I sent it down through the CYC groups and the judges panels, just to try to help people realize that, at the end of the day, staying out of the way of commercial traffic and or helping somebody else is really primary. Gaining or not gaining is totally secondary, and encourage everybody to do it. And Tacoma and CYC has this issue because of where you guys race as well. So this is a Rule 42 change, and it probably applies more to my aero sailing than it does to Martins and J70s on West Sound. However, if we're in a bigger event, like around the county or some pretty big weather, my understanding, Jared, is that we can now pump the main sheet one time per wave going to windward. Is that true?
So I'm sure there'll be interpretation on this coming out soon, but you're missing the front of the wave. So this is still the wave that's going with you. So I'm sure we've all seen the people trying to, you'll have a powerboat go behind you while you're going upwind, and you could surf that wave. And the old rules, you would not be allowed to do that. And the new rules, you can. But you can't. The way I interpret this is you can't sit there and pump on every wave going upwind, because you're actually going down the back of the wave, not the front of the
I'm gonna make that edit on the front. Okay, that's a good comment. So we were looking at laser race here in West Sound, and there was a lot of discussion about boats 1, 2, and 3 downwind. You know, what maneuvers they would make on every wave, and how it just totally outclassed those who didn't do it. And that's when the interpretation of Rule 42 came out. It was like 2 weeks later, really helped. And this change going to weather is needs to be defined, and I'll change that in my notes. Okay, we've already gone to exoneration. This is good. So this is another one for Bob. So, you know, if you're trying to take your penalty turns, when do you finish? You finish when your hull meets the line, nothing else. Trash disposal, I talked about this a little bit. Support people are held to the same rules as the competitors. Keep it clean. Oh, this was cool. So let's see if I have this one right. So if the boat is capsized, it's drifting towards the next mark or the finish line, and not everybody's on the boat, but they're in contact with the boat as they go over the finish line, is that okay? Jared?
Yeah, if they're touching the boat, and they go through the finish line upside down, they finished.
But they have to have the same number of crew that they started with touching the boat, right?
Oh, see, now this is stuff to judge. That would be my, unless it changes, that would be my guess. Yeah. So if you
Yeah.
have 3 people in the water, all 3 people need to be near touching that boat.
Gotcha. Okay, these are some housekeeping issues. I'm not going to get into it too much because it's getting a little later. This is useful information that you guys can read about. The protest form is no longer in the book. So that's a big deal. So there is a hearing request form and a hearing decision form in the documents that we can download, but you won't be able to find it in your book. And this is another reason to download that app and join US Sailing and get the app for free. Support people, can't be nasty, same as deal. Okay, anybody have any questions for Jared? I think that is a pretty good, I think I covered most of the points pretty well here. Anybody have anything for Jared?
Well, that was easy.
Apparently. Yeah, must be late. So just some comments. You know, I've gone through a lot of protest hearings, and I've heard a lot of protest hearings, and when we're at Whidbey, Jared has me help chair and co-chair these hearings as well. And I've learned a few things in the process. And if anybody else, Ron or Wolf's, you know, have had a lot of time in this area. If you've had it, you know, please share what you have. But these are my comments about, you know, just getting the most out of racing. First of all, it's so important to know the fleet level, the skill level of your fleet. You know, the Summer Shaw race has like 30 garage sailors that come out for the first time of the year. And sometimes they just want to luff you up because they think they can. They don't know any other rule, but they think they know that one, and so they do. Well, those are the folks that you tend not to want to engage with. Here in West End, everybody that's out sailing those J70s and the Martins, you know, everybody has really good command of their boat. They're willing to put their boats really close together. Starboard is confident with port. Port knows that starboard's not going to do anything crazy. Everybody's got it dialed in. So it's a real pleasure in West Sound with this group to sail one another because our skill levels are getting closer all the time. And so here it's pretty easy. But if we go to an event like Anacortes and there's boats that you don't know, you know, folks that you don't know, you might want to give them just a little extra space until you get a race or two under your belt and get a feel for, you know, what scares them or what doesn't. I forget the term. I was trying to come up with it with Jared. Ron, you might know it. But if a port boat lee bows a starboard boat and it scares the starboard boat out of their wits.
I think we lost you, Chris.
I was excited to hear where he was going with that.
Yeah, I was too, Ron.
Me too.
Disappeared.
I'd have
You
to say this is one of the more enjoyable ferry ride homes I've had in quite a while.
While we're waiting for Chris to come back, I just want to throw out one comment, and I think it speaks volumes about our West Sound JPod group here and everybody who sails with us. We all have a very mutual respect is important of the people of the boats. We have yet, knock on wood, to even touch boats on the water all winter long. It's fantastic. We are learning how to control the boats at 35 knots of wind. We're learning how to sail them really well upwind, really well downwind. We've got a really good handle on that. We're getting better every time we go out. What I want to make really clear to everybody that does come sailing, and even when we come in contact with boats from different areas, or maybe you don't know them, like the boat on Anacortes that Chris is referring to, we have to give those boats a little extra space, a little extra room. And if somebody comes out to join us and they're not as experienced, be really good to them. The whole idea is to be all inclusive and make this a really fun game for everybody to play. It's not a, we don't need to intimidate each other. We don't need to do any chest pounding. That's really, this group is not about that at all. And it's what I really enjoy about sailing with this group, is it's really fun. We had some fantastic racing last Sunday, extraordinary racing last Sunday, 3 races in great shifty breeze, puffy. And we had some really exciting mark roundings. We had lots of cool scenarios come up. And as recently as today, we're still chatting about, hey, so what if, with the weather mark, when this happened, 2 boats coming on port overlapped, what do the rules say about that? Or when you're coming flying down a run into the finish and you're calling for room at the finish mark or at a different mark, how do we want to treat those things going forward? And I hope that our group is learning to always be more respectfully communicative towards each other. I think it's perfectly appropriate at 10 boat lengths away when you're flying along going 15 knots in a J70 or something similar. And don't wait until the 3 boat length zone to say, I have an overlap or I don't have an overlap, and start that discussion, because it's going to be over in about 3 seconds. And that's what's going to cause an accident. So please understand, it's out of respect that we begin these conversations to choreograph effective mark roundings with each other. And we try to do that in a way that everybody works together that final 10 boat lengths. And if I say I have an overlap at 10 boat lengths, you don't need to turn and tell me I'm not at 3 boat lengths yet. You can just say, okay, well, let's wait and see. What I'm trying to do is establish with you and maybe the boats around you that this is the snapshot at 10 boat lengths. And if nothing significant changes, then I expect to have room, and you might plan ahead by giving me room early on. So I just want everybody to understand that we try really hard to be in the right mindset of getting everybody around the race course effectively and efficiently without the boats ever touching, and really without ever raising our voices. And it's something that's working really well with this group here. And it's that kind of like-minded approach to the sport. And I know Chris preaches that, and I have yet to run into anybody here on West Sound that does not think that's a great idea. But I just want to remind everybody that we really encourage, whether you know the rules or whether you have a question about the rule, ask the questions, even if it's during a race. You can always, if you're, especially in light air, we have some great conversations drifting around West Sound in light air. If you have a question about a rule or a question about something different, just shout over and somebody's going to help answer the question for you, because that's kind of the way we do it here. So I don't know if Chris has rejoined us, and I didn't want to hijack any of this, but I did want to thank him for the great contribution and clearly a lot of time and effort that was put into this tonight. So I'll let our fleet directors take over the show.
Well said, Ron.
Beth, do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah, it looks like Chris is completely gone off. So
Lost cyberspace.
what'd you say, Betsy?
He's lost in cyberspace.
Should we text or call Chris to see?
The Matrix.
Make sure he's okay.
Yeah, I had a quick question on the app. I hadn't looked at it myself. I apologize. I've been out and about. that app, is that 100% representative of the book? Is there anything that needs to be addressed in that app still?
Jared, could you answer that one?
I can after I figure out how to unmute myself. So yeah, as far as I know, the new app is actually pretty spot on. I haven't found anything wrong with it yet, as compared to the old app, which was terrible. But the new one, yeah, I think they really knocked it out of the ballpark. So if for no other reason than that app, join US Sailing. Because any question you have, you can find on that app pretty quickly.
Thanks, Jared. All right, is there any other questions for Jared while we still have him on the line? We lost Chris, but
I did have a question. This is Bob. For Jared, which came up with the issue of having to do with avoiding contact or damage, and where there is a collision, and the boat who has rights.
Pardon?
Are you able to copy your through, Jared?
I can hear you, but you're breaking up kind of bad. So far, I've got the boat that has rights.
Okay, so they are anticipating, the boat with rights are anticipating that the giveaway boat is going to do the right thing, and then too late in the process, the giveaway boat, I mean, you wait for it and you wait for it, and then the giveaway boat doesn't do what you anticipate they were going to do, results in a collision. Now, you could argue and say, well, you made the wrong assumption on that. You should have assumed that they weren't going to do something, or that they were going to hit you. You should have assumed that and kept away sooner. That's a judgment call. And in those kind of things, where does, I don't know how often this gets heard, or, where there's actually some kind of issue for the boat with rights who might have been able to avoid collision, but the collision wasn't avoided.
So actually, Rule 14 in that exact scenario comes up anytime there's contact. So whenever there's contact, if we have a protest and there's contact, we are required to discuss Rule 14. And what it comes down to is the right-of-way boat does not have to anticipate the giveaway boat's going to break a rule. So you don't have to anticipate that. There's no obligation on that. And there's actually a case that clearly defines that, when is it reasonable for a person to now say, hey, this guy's breaking the rule, I need to keep clear, or, to avoid contact. And that basically comes down to, it's a competent sailor, but not a professional sailor. So if Chris White, I'm going to use him as a guinea pig, would say, oh my God, I need to avoid contact, then that's a competent sailor. Where Jimmy Spittle may go a little, a couple feet more, or the new kid in the Opti is going to start avoiding contact 10 boat lengths early. That's just a competent sailor is the measure that we go off of. And there's actually a case that defines that. It's case 123 if you want to look it up.
Thank you.
Did that make sense to everybody?
Bob, if I could, Jared, I agree with what you just shared. I'd like to take a little different shot at it. And Bob, the way I like to think of this is if it does go to a situation that's already happened, you go to a protest room or you're trying to figure out who was right and who was wrong. One of the standard ways a good protest committee can kind of pick it apart is they back their way out of it. They say, well, here we start at the point of contact between starboard and port. Let's back up each boat 1 boat length. At that point in time, did port do anything to avoid the confrontation with the starboard? Did they had an opportunity to avoid there? Did they do anything to avoid it? No, they kept going straight. Okay. And then you come back out to 2 boat lengths or 3 boat lengths. And at some point in there is an appropriate time where port tack had lots of options to go ahead and avoid the collision. They could have tacked, they could have ducked, they could have done lots of things back at 3 boat lengths. They probably had fewer options at 2 boat lengths. Did they take any of those? At 1 boat length, they certainly should have done in dramatic fashion everything they could to avoid whatever was going to happen in that upcoming collision. But if they waited until 1 boat length, that paints a very bad picture for the port tacker. And so I'll kind of put it that way and say, you know what, at a certain point in time, the rule's the same, but we have to make decisions, and we're trying to train ourselves to make good decisions early to avoid bad situations. So to me, that's the way I kind of approach the rules. And I think if everybody goes in with a general mindset of what is expected to me as it gets closer, if you're able to make a decision early on, you have lots of great options. If you wait and hesitate, the good options start to go away. And at the end of the day, it's too late. But if you haven't made a good decision by the time it's too late, chances are you're a poor attacker and you're not going to survive that protest. Does that help in any way?
Yeah, I think so. You know, it's an interesting question about the boat with rights has to avoid the collision, but is there a circumstance where the boat that had rights could have, in hindsight, done something different to avoid the collision, and they didn't do that? I mean, but what is it that, what is their obligation? How far does their obligation extend to that point? I mean, the boat with rights, if they hadn't come sailing today, there wouldn't have been a collision, so they could have avoided it, right?
That's right.
Yeah, and I would actually use Ron's argument for the port boat. The same thing happens to the starboard boat. We go back one boat length. Okay, we're one boat length away. We're 2 seconds from collision here. What is the starboard boat doing now? Because now it's pretty clear boats are going to hit each other. And if the starboard boat isn't doing a bloody thing, then he's probably going to be found guilty of 14. But if the starboard boat says, "Oh, I turned up, I cracked my main, I tried to turn down," if he does something at that point, then he's going to be exonerated.
So, Bob, I want to speak to that for just a moment. We had a case in Round County. It was Weatherly, Santa Cruz 70, interacts with Mardi Gras in Boundary Pass going to Weather. Mardi Gras was on starboard. You might remember this one. Weatherly was on port. And the witness off of Weatherly, they were being rather cagey about whether or not they saw each other and then, when did things start to happen. Mardi Gras is screaming starboard. And one of the crew members of Weatherly says, "Yeah, that's when we crash tacked." So what ended up happening is that Mardi Gras crash tacked onto port, Weatherly crash tacks onto starboard, and they both avoid each other at the last possible minute. So in that case, starboard boat probably waited as long as anybody should have, maybe a little longer. They avoided a collision, but clearly in that instant, the port boat really didn't have any rights, but both boats made a last kind of a Hail Mary effort, if you will, to avoid a collision. So in that case, it was pretty clear port boat followed starboard boat. But man, I'll tell you what, things are happening faster with our boats these days. And the margins for when these moments turn on and off are getting narrower, I would say. So I think your question, Bob, is a really good one. When did you guys lose me? What was I saying when you lost me? About an hour ago.
Yeah.
You were just leading up to a very interesting item, which we all wanted to hear, Chris.
Adjourned. So,
hey, I have a question real quick, Chris.
You bet.
So Jared had mentioned where the cases are, and he referenced case 1, 2, 3. Where would we find those for review?
So actually, you can do a web search for world sales cases. That pops right up. But it's also on the app. So,
yes.
Yeah. And as Chris started this talk, the casebook is freaking huge. Pretty much only judges use it, but they are technically rules. But if you're bored on an airplane, read the casebook. But other than that, you really don't need to dive into it too much.
Right. They're interesting because they explain some of these. Am I still there? Yeah. They explain some of the close call, well-written protests and what happens in the end. So it's pretty good. So I wanted to just kind of button up by saying, did you guys hear my suggestions about protests? Uh-oh. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
I don't think we heard you explaining about protests.
Okay.
Halfway through.
Yeah, okay, this is a pretty short section, and then I think we can button up for the night. So some comments about protests. Protests aren't really something to be afraid of. It's a great opportunity usually to end up educational. At the end of the day, you learn a little bit more about your competitor in those rooms if they're managed well and people are have their wherewithal with them. But I have some suggestions for how to handle protests, how to avoid protests, and how to optimize when you're going to end up in a protest. So just quickly, fleet skill levels. Just know the folks you're sailing against. If somebody's really good, you both have confidence, and you want to leave out somebody really close, that's great. If you're not aware of that person's skills, you might take a couple of races to kind of figure them out before you put a lot of pressure on them. I think that coming into marks, weather marks, leeward marks, just kind of make a comment to other boats nearby and say, hey, I think I have an overlap. What do you see? No, I don't. Sometimes if I'm the lead boat, I'll kind of use my arm and sort of draw a line across the water and say, this is where I think you are. And just as much as we can, try to get that dialogue to evolve so that it doesn't evolve at the mark. I think that's a really good tip. I recommend using the app after sailing. Use the whiteboard. It's like, who do you want to be, red boat or green boat? And put the app together. And what's so nice about it is it's so easily manipulated. So you can kind of say, this is how I thought it came together. And then ask the other person to see how they thought it came together. Knowing that and going through that exercise will help you to understand when things are about to go bad in a situation that's brewing. More times you do that, with your sailing colleagues, the more you're going to know about how each other's going to behave in certain instances. When it comes time to, there's an incident, somebody boats touch, and somebody hits a mark for whatever reason, really a good idea to have somebody on your boat assigned. You guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Assigned to making some notes, boat speed, wind speed, current, what boats were around you in the event you need witnesses and or to put a diagram together. If there is a contact, what's that damage perception like? Is there an injury on your boat? And the sooner you document that on the race course, the way better your presentation will evolve before you're in front of a judge's committee. If you're putting it together by memory, or your witnesses are, usually it doesn't go well in the room. And at the end of the day, what the judges are looking for are findings of fact. So the more data they can put together, the better understanding about how many meters or how many feet per second the boat's traveling, they can actually unwind that event 3-4 boat lengths back. And that's like what Ron was referring to. That's how they're going to figure out, when somebody failed to make that last move when they should have. So getting somebody assigned to that is just as important as having somebody assigned to looking aft for wind shifts and traffic and talking to a helms person and trimmers and things of this nature. And this is one of the things that Jeff and I have done for quite a while, and it's really helped us out in sticky situations. Whenever you can on the beach after an event, everybody okay, your boat okay, anything need to be done, that kind of sportsmanship, I think is just a wonderful thing. And then in closing, I wanted to say that folks like Boris and Mike and the others that own these 70s that are making these boats available, Ron, the photos that you're taking, it was a good photo on the Arrow, by the way. Thank you for that. The trim data sharing and the rig tension sharing, man, this fleet is it's getting better than I've ever seen it. And it's really exciting to see this fleet develop so quickly. So, and I, all of you are responsible for making that happen. And so everybody's pitching in, everybody's going out, everybody's sailing with different crews. I think it's great. It's one of the best things I've ever seen. And I while I'm a member of CYC at this time, so I can join the aero fleet down there, I really haven't seen fleet building like I'm watching it evolve on West Sound right now. So in my opinion, that's a kudo to all of you for going out and hitting it every Sunday, and sometimes really crummy weather. But I think you guys are killing it, and I'm really excited about seeing where this is going to continue to go. So good job.
Thank you, Chris. And thanks for the great contribution on the rules and the education on the app as well tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
thank you. Does anybody
Thanks,
have any-
Chris. Appreciate it, man. You guys take
Yeah.
care. Have a good evening.
Thanks for joining, Jared.